Hey, how's it going? Dr. Medic here. So, we just finished up on the mini-series where I took my 2-hour-plus long ranking every weapon plus fun facts videos from January 10th and January 13th. This was basically a mini-series where I took that video and I spliced it up for each individual class. I started that series on February 20th with the Scout. I then did Soldier on March 20th, and then the 20th every month would do another class over 9 months until we finished on October 20th with the Spy. That's all over. So this video series is going to be very similar in premise. Some may have seen my underappreciated weapons video where I talked about weapons that don't get as much love as I think they should, in all honesty. That video was an hour and 40 minutes long, which turned some people away. So this will be a rehash of that video where I splice it up, maybe touch it up a little bit, and release segments for each individual class the same way I did for the last series. To make things a little more interesting, I have decided to add one new segment to these videos as well, so there's something original in these. These will be other items I did not talk about in my original underrated weapons video, or underappreciated weapons video. So if you've seen the original, there's still some new content for you, and if you haven't, you got a bunch of new content to watch. Either way, let's start the video. These first 3 segments will be the same, and the new segment will be placed at the end. Let's get into it. The shortstop. With the upside of a tighter spread, more damage per pellet, but only having 4 pellets, so technically it's a damage penalty. It lacks the 175% ramp up that all other scatterguns have, only capping out at 150%. But it also fires much faster, having a 0.36 second attack interval instead of a 0.625 second attack interval. The max damage of this weapon is 72 at full ramp up. It also reloads all at once, but it only has 4 rounds in total, a secret 34% penalty, and its reload is about 50% or so slower than the pistol. It also has a secondary fire that gives you the ability to reach out and shove someone a short distance, dealing 1 whole damage. The only listed downside on this thing is a pushback vulnerability, which isn't listed but is actually 20%. The shortstop. While not hated per se, it is a weapon that is often considered not that good, especially by a lot of community members. The amount of videos I've seen of people calling this weapon not good is just baffling to me, because in reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. I think a big reason why is its secondary attack, and the fact that they removed a very good upside from it, being the 20% health from health packs bonus it had many moons ago, prior to Meet Your Match and after they got rid of set bonuses. People look at the secondary fire and write this weapon off in its entirety, which honestly doesn't make sense. Yeah, the secondary fire is terrible. However, the primary fire is not. It is a great mid-range weapon. While Scout excels at close range, and that is often the argument against this weapon, the shortstop can do great damage at mid-range, especially with the additional accuracy of this thing. This thing is pretty accurate. It is the closest thing to a sniper for Scout. But being able to do 48 damage from mid-range is not too shabby. It also has a high DPS in Man vs. Machine when maxed out, assuming you don't know about the bug with the soda popper where it allows you to get a 10% faster firing speed, completely ruining the shortstop, but anyway. It is actually pretty damn good. Now, this thing is not as reliable as the stock scattergun. The stock scattergun is kind of just an all-around really good weapon. The shortstop does have its shortcomings. Like I said, up close, it's not that great. But at mid-range, this thing is crazy. And I'll admit, this weapon isn't some sort of gem that breaks the game and people just don't know about it because they're glued to the meta, even though that most people are. That being stated, this weapon gets a bit too much hate because people don't know how to use it right. You know, it'd be like using the direct hit and wondering why it's not very good at crowd control. The weapon isn't designed for that. You're using it wrong. You can't just use it the same way you would use every other weapon and hope it works. Even if the class's main philosophy revolves around a certain playstyle, it doesn't matter. This weapon is an alternative, and that goes for both the direct hit and the shortstop in this case. The shortstop is actually really, really good. Now for the Scout's secondaries. None of Scout's secondary items are really all that underrated, with only 1 or 2 coming to mind at all. But there is one in particular that people do not often talk about or use that much, but is actually pretty good. And the people who do use it they know how useful it can truly be and how much of a crutch it can be. The weapon we are going to be discussing, or rather the consumable we are discussing, is Bonk Atomic Punch. The other option was the Winger, but I feel like that gets a little more use. So we're going to talk about Bonk. Scout's first unlockable secondary added all the way back in February of 2009. In the current day, Bonk offers you an 8-second invulnerability period, but you cannot fire your weapon. It also puts you in a third-person animation. When the effects wear off, if you have taken any damage whatsoever, you'll be slowed by 25%, up to 50% if you've taken over 200 damage. This all comes at the cost of technically a 22-second recharge. The Bonk is not a weapon that is necessarily considered bad by the community. I don't want to get it twisted. But it is a weapon that is often overlooked. The Bonk can be really good. It can be good for getting past sentries, taking damage for your team, getting the eyes off of like your medic, for example, or just being a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's worse than the Dead Ringer in that regard, but I believe the reason people don't complain about Bonk as much is because of its longer cooldown and the fact that Scout has many other options which people use more often. There isn't really much for this one. I think people prefer things like Mad Milk due to its high utility, pistols, specifically the Pretty Boy's Pocket Pistol, due to its effectiveness as a damage-dealing finisher, even though the Winger was supposed to do that, but whatever. The Cleaver due to its spam and its old combo. And when it comes to drink/lunchbox items, people often focus on the Criticola due to that weird history and just odd concept as a whole. Still, it's a very good weapon. I'm surprised that more scouts aren't using this thing, but I understand it's hard to give up the reliability of some of the other options. Finally, for the last weapon on Scout. The melee slot is really tough, and it's kind of a toss-up. It was between the Atomizer and the Boston Basher. Or if you would have asked me about 6 or 7 years ago, it would have also been between those two and the Wrapped Assassin. But the Wrapped Assassin has been getting a lot more use lately, which is really good to see, because it is actually a pretty good item. I think the reason it didn't get a lot of use was because of the old Sandman, but anyway, we're getting off topic. Both of these I think are decent, but are underutilized by a lot of the player base. The Boston Basher is known for things like being able to help you build Uber by sitting in spawn and letting the team medic farm off of you. And a lot of new players seem to gravitate towards it due to it being an interesting looking weapon with an interesting set of stats. Yet the Atomizer doesn't seem to get the same treatment. Now, I could be a bit off, because you only really see this thing for a split second when it's active now. Back in the day, you wouldn't even know if a scout had it at all until he decides to randomly triple jump in the middle of a fight. So maybe I'm just not seeing it as much because, scouts are pulling it out, getting their triple jump in, and putting it away. But anyway, here are the stats of the Atomizer. It grants a triple jump while deployed, specifically. Melee attacks while airborne will now mini crit for some reason. Not 100% sure why. There's a 15% damage penalty versus players, which doesn't do all that much, and a 50% slower deployed speed penalty. I think the Atomizer gets underused because many scouts reminisce about the old days when it was just minus 10 health to jump without having to actually pull it out, making some fights, especially against soldiers and Demoman, pretty trivial. And some scouts don't use it because they don't see the possibilities of using it. It seems weird. Why would I even care about being able to triple jump? It's the more experienced scouts that understand how many doors this opens. In my shortstop segment, you could see me using the Atomizer quite often to get to advantageous areas. Even in these clips I'm showing you now, this thing's really good. The Atomizer offers a triple jump on command for free, just for having it out. That's it, you just need the weapon deployed. You can find some great spots that would be hard to reach otherwise. It also allows you to reach these spots without the requirement of a triple jump from the Force of Nature or having to deal 350 damage to activate the Soda Popper's ability. You can even combine it with the Force of Nature and Atomizer to get crazy quadruple jumps. The Atomizer is amazing in the hands of a competent scout, and like I said, it isn't super underrated as a whole, but I feel like many fail to see the potential the Atomizer has. It really does open a lot of doors for you, if you know how to use it and you know your map. For the new segment, I'm going to talk about a weapon that's kind of overlooked. Even I overlooked it. It's probably not the one you're thinking of. I could talk about the Babyface's Blaster not being as bad as some people say it is, though it's still kind of trash sometimes. And it's not even that it's necessarily trash, but it's just so punishing. Sure, it's still a scattergun and can do good damage, but man, it's just like, why would you ever use this, pretty much, unless you're just trying to have fun, which is okay. I could talk about the Winger being underutilized and people not seeing the potential with that, but no, I'm going to talk about a weapon people often overlook, and I think some people might not even know this weapon exists. No, it's not the Sun on the Stick. I know some of you were thinking that. No. The weapon I'm talking about, without a doubt, has to be the Fan of War. Before I start going into reasons for why I think it's underrated, let's begin with the stats. Upon a successful hit of an enemy gamer, you'll mark them for death for 15 seconds. For those who don't know what marking for death is, that's basically, it just causes them to take mini crits. That's it. It's the same as like Girardi, but it doesn't have any of the weird visual screen effects. This can only be applied to a single player at a time, however. It will also crit when it would normally mini crit, similar to the Bushwhacker. This doesn't do much, but it takes the base 9 damage and ramps it up to 26. Some may not see how that kind of maths out, but I think it's because technically it does 8.75 damage, which is rounded up for regular swings, but you do 3 times damage, so it's rounded down with a crit swing, since, you know, it would do 26.25, so it just rounds down to 26 instead of going up to 27. Don't mean to convolute it, but I think that's how it pretty much works. And that leads us to the downside. There's only one, and I'm sure you can guess what it is. It's a 75% damage penalty, bringing the base damage down to effectively 9 against players and 8 against buildings. So it's not the best killing weapon, it's not the best killing tool as a weapon itself, you know. Why did I pick the Fan of War to talk about? Everyone knows the Fan of War is a staple weapon in Man vs. Machine because of the utility for giant shredding. That's obvious. But what could be so great about it in casual? You probably often hear people say that this weapon is bad because the damage is pitiful, you can always just kill them outright, or because it's often a suicide mission to use this weapon. You're going to get killed anyway. Those are somewhat true, but I think they're blown out of proportion, and people don't really see the utility of this item. It's actually a lot better than people give it credit for. While the damage is low, you're not meant to actually deal damage with a Fan of War. Yes, scouts do that, but that's because scouts are idiots, okay? You're not actually supposed to use this as a killing tool. I talked about that whole using the weapon wrong in the shortstop segment. It'd be like being upset with the short circuit because the damage is pitiful. It doesn't make any sense. It's a utility. It's not a damage tool. It's a support item. Sorry, I get a little bit worked up there. The intent with this weapon is that you could either catch an enemy off guard and hit them with this, marking them for death, pretty much sealing their fate as you have the upper hand in the fight, and you don't have to be as precise. Sure, you could always 2 or 3 tap them, but sometimes spread screws you over. This gives you a little more room for error. This allows you to back up while still doing some good damage, since, you know, mini crits, they make it where there's no damage fall off. It's pretty good. And even if they do manage to kill you, they are likely to engage with another enemy within 15 seconds, and they'll be at a massive disadvantage in that fight as well. Except when I'm trying to get footage for this thing. God, sometimes, man. Getting footage, if you know, you know. It could be a pain in the balls. But anyway, the Fan of War is pretty good for one-on-ones, especially since it kind of just gives you straight up the upper hand, and you don't have to worry about spread as much. If it's a tanky enemy like a heavy or an overhealed enemy that's near a corner and causing issues, you can also run in, hit them, and run around the corner in order to allow your teammate to start doing some hurt on the guy, you know, the teammates that are over there that are on your team, and hopefully helping you out. The other time you use this is in a last-ditch Hail Mary sort of situation, you know, and you're about to die, and you just go in for that hit, marking them for death for 15 seconds. This is best used when there's like a heavy on the other team, or a soldier, or something like that, and they're on the point, and you just need to go in for that Hail Mary. Maybe throw some Mad Milk at them or whatever, but just go in, man, and just hit them with this and mark them for death for 15 seconds. It's pretty much going to ensure they die, unless they manage to get away and evade danger for 15 seconds, which can happen, but I don't think happens very often. TF2 is a very chaotic game, and I keep saying it. 15 seconds is a long-ass time. It's nothing to scoff at. This weapon right here is phenomenal for support scouts. I know most people don't play scout that way, but if you want to be a team player, this can be a great weapon for marking high priority targets and making it easier for your team. While it's not always as good as something like the Wrapped Assassin, I guess, or even the Atomizer. I don't know why I chose the Atomizer for the last video. I'm leaving it in because why not? But yeah, those can give you, better utility sometimes. The extra range damage from the Wrapped Assassin is nice. But the Fan of War is still a great choice for those scouts who want a 1-2 combo, or really just want to be a team player going after those high priority enemies. Working best against soldiers, heavies, and medics, those spies, snipers, and really any other class is major bitch when you manage to hit a swing on them. Don't sleep on the Fan of War. That will do it for the Fan of War and this video as a whole. Sorry I had to repeat myself several times. It happens, but I think people just sleep on this weapon. They really shouldn't. I'll stop blabbing on. I will see you on December 20th when I put out the soldier video. Until then, peace out.